Welcome to Let's Learn Lua. I will be your guide as we explore programming and game development. I've decided to start out with a series of lessons on the Lua scripting language. My goal is to eventually teach you the skills required to program your own games, as well as many other things. What is Lua? Well, Lua is a small and simple programming language. It is quite popular in the games industry, being used in titles such as World of Warcraft, the Saints Row series, Dark Souls, LA Noire, as well as many more. I feel that it is a great first programming language to learn. Rather than being confused by the syntax, Lua keeps it simple and just lets you focus on the logic of your program. So, what do we need to get started? To start, you will need to acquire a text editor. This is where you'll be writing your Lua programs. I'll be using Visual Studio Code, however any editor that supports Lua syntax highlighting will do just fine. You'll also need to install a Lua interpreter. If you're on Windows, the easy way is to download the Lua For Windows binary, and I'll link that in the description. For Linux users, Lua should be in your software repository under a name such as Lua 5.1 or similar. For anything else, I'm not too sure. To run your Lua scripts, you can open the command line. Your system may be different, but on mine at least, I can use the start menu, type in CMD, and press enter to open the command line. Once I've opened the command line, you might have to navigate to the folder where your script is. CD is short for change directory, and you use this command to move around. dir will list everything in the current directory, which might also be useful if you need to look for a certain file. Once you handle that, you'll run the Lua command along with the name of your file, a space between the two. If you run Lua without specifying a file, it'll start into interactive mode, where it runs Lua scripts one line at a time as you type them in. If you need to try something out quickly, that's how you can do it. Of course, if you have any issues or questions, feel free to leave a comment and I will do my best to help out. Otherwise, that's about all the setup we have to do. We're ready to dive right in. I made a bit of a mistake with the recorder and jumbled this part up, but all I was saying is you're ready to open your text editor and create a new file, and the keybind for that is usually Control+N, or you can also go to File, New, and you want to save it with a Lua file extension, and just make sure it's somewhere that you can find and it's a file name you can remember. So, the Lua programming language has a very small set of tools that it starts you out with. It's very simple. But that simplicity doesn't mean it's useless. It's actually quite a very powerful language, I would say. But to get us started, the main thing you're going to need to learn for now is variables. To define a variable in Lua, you just type something, for example. Something, and this is what you would call your assignment operator, and you're just setting something to a value. If it's already defined, no big deal, we can just override it with something else. If, one way that Lua differs, though, from most languages is that if something hasn't been defined yet, then instead of causing an error, making your program crash, it's just going to return a special value called nil. And that's basically just a way for you and the computer to know, hey, this value isn't really useful, they haven't done anything with it yet. If we were to run the program as is now, Lua give me a second. Yeah, there we go. You can see that if we print something, it'll say nil because we haven't defined something yet. If we were to move this statement down here and then save and run it again, you'll see it gives us 5. And once again, if we move it down here, run it again, you'll see we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Back to the types of data that we have to work with in Lua. These are the ones I'm going to be going over real quickly. This is a string value, which is basically a way of storing, words, sentences, bits of information alphanumerically. It can be any character really, but this is how you do it. You just have 2 double quotes or single quotes. Those also work, but you have to have them both on either side. So this is how you open and close the string statement. Number it's pretty self-explanatory. Just any type of number value that you would have, you know, whole number, half number. You can also do note. You can also have hexadecimal numbers, I believe. Let's try that out. Yes, just like that, and probably binary as well. But don't quote me on that. And here we have the good old Boolean value, or bool for short. It only has two states, either true or false. It can only be one of the two. This is useful for doing certain flags in your program. Say you want to have a value or a variable set to whether or not you should be running some debug function within your code. You can, you know, have a variable called debug equals true, and then you can use that in your logic later. Tables. Now, tables are very, very useful in Lua, and they have many different uses, which I will go into later. But for now, just know that they can store other variables inside of themselves. Tables can also store their own tables, so on, forever, actually. Like I said earlier, nil value just denotes that it has no useful data. If you set a variable equal to nil in Lua, it's the same as if, you know, the variable just hasn't been set yet. Lua isn't going to complain or crash your program if you try to access a variable that hasn't been defined yet. It's just going to return nil. That's one difference from some other programming languages, is that they will crash if you haven't defined the variable yet. Lastly, functions, which are the main way of making routines, subroutines, so on. In Lua, it's used for encapsulation. So instead of rewriting the same group of statements 10 times in your program, you could write the function once, put all the statements in that function, and then when you need to, you can call that function those 10 different times in your program. So it's very useful for actually writing decent code, basically.